Hello and welcome to TechWhirl's Fast Five discussions, and thank you for joining us for today's show. My name's Al Martine, and today we're saying don't panic. Yes, it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to XML Authoring. Today we'll explore the business side of XML, including if your company needs to migrate to it, preparing for the journey, and ensuring you get every penny out of the investment. On our show today, to help us better understand XML and overcome some of our fears, is Chris Despopoulos. He's the author of Adobe's white paper, Hitchhiker's Guide to XML, which is coincidentally what we're calling this. Chris has been working in tech pubs since the late 80s. He started by documenting Multimate, an IBM word processor, back when tech pub executives were sporting 10 megs of desktop. He and our other guest, Maxwell Hoffmann, worked at Frame Technology during the time when they brought the first Mac version maker to the market. He's currently in Spain and has been there since 1998, where he started CudSpan. Was during his time he also started working heavily in XML. Today he's all over this XML and data thing, having just converted documentation for VM Turbo, which is where he works right now, from unstructured to DITA, and even implemented his own system that takes DITA to HTML. In other words, the guy knows technology, he understands documentation, and he really understands XML and DITA, which is really helpful because that's what we're going to be asking him today. So it really just works quite well. Chris, welcome to our show.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for putting it on.
So from what I understand, in addition to enjoying the Spanish sun, I hear that you enjoy playing classical and Baroque guitar, the mandor, ukulele, and you have just taken up the trombone. So my question would be, which one's your favorite, and is there any connection between the tech work and this outlet?
Yeah, I really have to say that you can't lay favorites on a group of instruments like that. They're all special. They're all wonderful things. But since I'm just starting with a trombone, I'm pretty excited about that. I guess maybe I'll be a better kisser or something. And I would really like to say something witty about music and tech pubs, but I can't, so no, it's got nothing to do with it. It's just something that I really enjoy doing. Music was my first love.
XML, same as writing music. On FrameMaker, the music that you make from FrameMaker is this. We'll do the shameless commercial plug here in a minute.
Yeah. There is structure to music. How about that?
Yeah,
and then the attributes of my trombone playing are really not to be missed.
Fair enough. I played trombone a couple years when I was in junior high, and it was wanted to miss. So very good. We're glad you're able to join us. So also helping us today with some of the tough questions before our world blows up. Maxwell Hoffmann, he's Adobe's Evangelist for Technical Communication.
Yep.
He has a background in agency work. He's spent time with Frame Technology and worked for over a decade in translation and localization. But unknown to us until earlier today, when we were gathering information, we know now more about Maxwell. First, that he earned his way through university as a live-in assistant at a mortuary.
Yes.
As well as a sign painter around the Fresno, California area, with some of the logos are still in existence. So Maxwell, welcome back.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Very interesting. So the first part of that, there's a lot there, and we want to explore the entire process. I think it might be a different show. The logos.
Yeah, sure.
So which ones are still in existence? Like you said, there are some that are still out there. What would people see in Fresno? And there's that is your work.
Sure. Well, to avoid lawsuits, I won't name the companies, but if you go into Clovis, California, which is a suburb and actually supposedly a good antique market, I haven't been there in many moons. Anyway, Clovis, California, there was a local tire dealership. And they the town of Clovis, or the suburb of Clovis, is very into Western themes, like branding irons and rope and all that kind of stuff. So they had me design for their logo a stagecoach with mag wheels. Like I kid you not. And actually, it looked pretty good if that's what you want, you know. And this was, hey, I got to admit, it was in the 70s, you know. A lot of people say it was the 70s. A number of other ones I did. One of the most popular styles was rope lettering, you know, like where literally I had to paint like rope, spelling things out. Also, I did some work, some of my college work, I have to say, was during the bicentennial, and there was a dreadful typeface, I think it's still around, called Uncle Sam, and it was made out of stars on the top and stripes on the bottom. And I cannot tell you, I think people have moved on, but I can't tell you how many businesses had stuff spelled out in blue stars and red bars, and it'd be like all caps, you know, Yanni's hair salon. I mean, you couldn't read it. It may as well have been another language. So it was stuff like that, you know. And I did design the logo for the California Cotton Growers Association. I think they may have modified it since then. But if you drive around Clovis or Fresno, you'll see stuff that I did.
Very nice. When I was a youth in Beckley, there was oftentimes that you would see some of my artwork in places, but that was always taken down. So.
Oh yeah, it wasn't authorized, Jim. Well, I think some of that artwork ended up on top of my artwork, with very deservedly so. Now, are you sure you don't want to ask about the other part?
Oh yes, we do. We really do. But there's a lot there, and yeah, okay, I gotta ask. So, what was the primary job here? Live-in, kind of temperature checker. What was happening?
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, I will say this. I know that there could be some, and not even being humorous, I know there could be somebody watching who's recently had a death in the family, so I will be very respectful and tasteful about the mortuary experience. Basically, it was basically answering phones, making appointments, helping move things from one room to another, driving flowers out to the cemetery, and then I was often an attendant or somebody who stood by the casket during funerals. I can tell you what my number one takeaway was from that experience, because I think how many people can say they went to over 200 funerals and didn't know anybody there? But I was very callous as a university student. You know, I think I had kind of a crass attitude, like, oh, funerals are just a waste of money. Why do people even do this? Just have a party. I can't believe anybody does this. And I really learned to respect how important closure is to people, because there were a lot of cases where I don't know what people's baggage were, but I saw many people who came to funerals and they really needed to see that loved one, or even just the box, one more time, or they could not, in their mind, they could not. They couldn't grasp a person had left. So I can certainly appreciate what the Malaysia airline survivors are going through. And that was something I carried away. We did have, if you want something on the humorous side, we did have a Hells Angels funeral. I'm not sure how the gentleman died. And it was kind of interesting because everybody looked like Hells Angels, and, you know, they looked like extras from a movie. And it was open casket, and kind of their tradition, which was sort of like the Vikings, was everybody went forward one at a time, and they actually put something in the casket, kind of like a token. So there were all these knives, brass knuckles, marijuana. You know, it was kind of like all this stuff for this guy to carry into the next world.
Well, got to be prepared.
Yeah, just to himself.
Let's hope there's no TSA.
Yeah. And the last thing I can. Last thing I'm trying to make it brief, and I'll make sure it's tasteful. Many funeral homes still have this tradition of having a separate room for the family to sit in. You're kind of out of sight behind a sheer curtain or something. And this was during a period of time that lavalier microphones had recently been refined, and they could pick up sounds from 20 feet away. So the family room happened to be adjacent to the organ, and where these little ladies with quavering voices would sing. Well, one of the little ladies took off the lavalier microphone, set it down, and didn't turn it off. And it's next to the family, and somebody in there was deciding to make comments about everybody out in the pews, and she didn't know if this running commentary was going out over speakers, you know, around the entire thing. And the floor plan of the complex was such that you couldn't just walk directly through it. I had to run around the building to run in and turn it off. And just as I was coming through the door to turn it off, I heard her voice go out over the crowd and say, "Oh my God, there she is. it's his mistress. So that was it was interesting to see how people exited the building when that was over.
All right. Well, I have no idea how we can top this pinnacle at this point, but I think we'll I knew it was going to rabbit hole. I knew.
We went down that rabbit hole. We went down.
We kept almost all the viewers, except probably Jill, who are like, "I'm out. I'm not taking any more notes on this." So, all right. So, also helping here as we do, we promised remaining viewers we're going to did it here in a minute. So, helping ask the questions and kind of explore this topic, as always, is TechWhirl's editor, Connie Giordano. Welcome. Haven't seen you before this. You know.
Yeah, just minutes and minutes. Absolutely, yeah. So.
In the world of content technology and communications, what's being talked about now today?
Well, I'm hoping that people will start talking about the new poll that we put out on the site this morning, which is asking people about what other basically related fields to what's happening in TechCom and customer experience that people should be learning about, like text analytics and things like that. So that's the big thing. We're getting ready to head out to a couple of conferences, so we're busier than one-armed paper hangers right now trying to get prepared for that. And just enjoying watching the debates continue on the TechWhirl list, as they always do.
Very cool. So, also
I can tell you some weird job stories as well, but I think we'll leave that for another time.
We've kept it for another. Viewers.
It won't be the mortuary assistant, but I do have some interesting job stories. So.
So also helping us today is Jill Parman. She's typing the notes. We do have our live notes going on the main website. Before we start, and we do this each time, Adobe, Maxwell is with Adobe, and they're one of our largest sponsors. We want to encourage you. This show is 98%, well, probably 90% helping folks answer questions. 8% having a little bit of fun, and then a little bit of talking about particular software. And if you're in the market and you're taking a look at help authoring tools and software, have a look at the Adobe's Technical Communication Suite 5 for FrameMaker XML, RoboHelp, Adobe Acrobat's in there. It's got a 30-day free trial, so you can, if you're on our site, go ahead and click on the Adobe icon, get there, you can download it, give it a try. There's a reason a lot of corporations are using it, and make sure you understand the tool itself. So reach out to Maxwell, reach out to the Adobe team, and get them to help you get the most out of it in this free trial. It's like I said, we're not telling you to buy it, we're just telling you to get it's worth it. So they're a longtime partner of TechWhirl. I was doing the math. I think they've been all bar a little bit of time. We've been around 21 years as a company. I think about 20 of them Adobe's been with us. So just take that on board, folks. We're going to be spending the rest of the time talking about our Fast 5 questions, which it's time to do it. Fast 5, we have worked to find 5 questions on XML and management style questions that we're going to ask today. Connie and I are going to go back and forth. We've also received a couple questions submitted when people signed up. And if you have a pressing question that you want to ask either Maxwell or Chris, use the Twitter hashtag TWFast5, the numeral 5. If you're on our TechWhirl site and you're watching this, you're not on the YouTube broadcast, but you're on the site, you'll actually be able to submit those questions on the embedded little form that we put there. So feel free to ask any questions. We will, if we get to them, we will throw them in now. If not, we'll answer all those questions via some either the write-up that we'll do on this or this via direct email. As I mentioned before, there is a Google Doc. We started doing this a little while ago, also on the TechWhirl page. Click on it. You'll actually see the notes in real time. You have editing privileges at this moment. At the end of the show, we'll go to read only. If you see something that we missed, or there's something else you want to add, please don't ask questions on it because we're not monitoring that. But jump in there. It's there. It's there to help folks either pay attention. You can grab a copy of it once you're done if you really need the annotated notes about doing tagging when I was 15 years old, or also questions around data as well. We do have a ton of questions. So Connie, you ready to lead off?
I guess I am. I'm going to start with Chris. Chris, could you share with us how you came up with some of the conclusions that are in the white paper? For instance, what type of workflows were you involved in where you observed the increased productivity after the XML processes were introduced?
Okay, sure. Okay, first, I think before I get started, I do want to say that the white paper is it's kind of focusing on Adobe FrameMaker, but I think you can take a step back and you can say, well, that is a tool and that's one focus in it. But in fact, a lot of the principles that are laid out in that white paper are generally applicable and are useful for considering an entry into XML or maybe refining your approach to it. I think FrameMaker is a good foil for understanding structure because the user interface gives you a good presentation of structure and that sort of thing, but the principles are pretty general. They apply across the board. Okay, so that said, I mean, to your question, what are the different workflows, and I think well, first of all, the way I kind of approached writing the white paper was kind of just based on experience and just the sort of work that I've been called on to do and where I've seen benefits come into enterprises. I'm kind of the tools guy in a way. I'm called in to integrate and make things happen. So a lot of the decisions are already made before I get started, but then it turns into a matter of can you make the decisions actually come to light? I think probably the bottom line is with XML and structure is that what it does is it starts treating what's more like a free-form document. It starts treating it more like a database, and so what that gives you at that point is a lot of different hooks, a lot of different places where you can do computer processing. Computers are really good at doing tedious stuff, and people tend to make mistakes. They tend to get bored. They tend to not want to do it. So if you can get computers involved in the processing for your documents, then that's probably a good thing. So where have I run into, kind of what are the workflows that I've run into, and so one workflow had to do with airline, or not airline, but aircraft maintenance guides, maintenance kind of decks of maintenance cards, and what they needed to track were the changes. And they needed to produce what are called effective pages, and this is an old problem. It's been around for a long time, and the idea is you've got these pages, and now something has changed, and you need to stick the changes in this collection of pages. You need to number them correctly. So if page 2025 now has changed, you want 2025A, 2025B. So you come up with what are called point pages, and doing all of this kind of manually and keeping track of it is a real problem. But if you can just use XML, or actually for this particular job it was SGML. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Yeah. Stands for sounds great, maybe later. But you could track the dates for what they called effectivity, which is to say these changes were published on such and such a date. Those changes were published on another, and then you can just go into the document source and just print out only the changed pages, put a package together, and send it out to all your customers. That sort of a thing. So you can see I hope you can see anyway, how computer processing steps in and helps with that, and how the benefits of the structure and the attributes that you can attach to the structure give the computer something to get a hold of and use. So that's one approach or one workflow. I've worked on catalogs where you had to track changes to the catalog, or maybe you wanted to keep product codes with your descriptions, so then you could bring in the data about each article in the catalog, and that sort of thing. And again, it's pretty close to database publishing, and I've done true database publishing as well. And then finally, just kind of another thing that I've encountered at VM Turbo is just the benefit of keeping, I'm documenting software here, and we're keeping the source documentation with the source code. So as the code branches out, the documentation stays with the source code, and everything stays in line. I don't know how well that answers your question, but these are some examples of workflows that I've been involved in. And I think probably the common theme all along is just that you're finding hooks in the documentation so that you can connect computer processing to your workflow.
I would assume that means that what you're doing is you're really allowing, the authors to concentrate on authoring rather than all of the fussing with all of the stuff about what number has to go where and all of that, that they can talk about whatever that change is, as opposed to, what page it has to be on and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, absolutely, that's very true. Is that what you can do is you can pay attention to the actual information that you need to get to people, and then kind of the whole point of XML is that you provide the content, and then with XML and computer processing and this and that, then you can let go of how all that content actually gets to the user. If you need to bring things in from different sources, you can let the computers do that. That's what computers are good at doing. But the content good at doing, and so you put the content out there and let the system kind of glom it all together so it goes out the way it needs to go.
Okay. Good.
All right, so let's say I am a manager and I am considering XML. What is the business case for it? How do I argue to my managers or to the CFO, and what do I give them that's compelling?
Is that to Chris or Max?
To Maxwell. Why don't you go ahead? Watch this one.
Okay. No problem, sure. I'm going to keep my eye on the clock as I answer this. Well, there's actually several business cases that I think would apply to virtually anyone. Extending from what Chris just said, a good XML solution, which FrameMaker certainly provides, virtually all of your formatting is automatic. So I would say the first thing is consistent results and consistent structure. Many people creating airline documentation are still using Microsoft Word, and one of the challenges there is people are clicking on icons at the top to make bullets and that sort of thing, and you may have somebody who occasionally decides they want square bullets instead of round, so just something that simple. When editing data or XML, in FrameMaker and with most other systems, I believe too, if you have 3 levels of a list, and if you decide to take the 3rd level nested list and drag an item up to the top level, it will automatically reformat itself. I worked with one XML solution on FrameMaker in which tables would automatically reformat themselves. So if a table were dragged immediately after a figure, it would become the little tiny table that gives you the callouts, that would go after that. So I'd say the first major key would be consistency. Second one for anyone I would say is training. We all go through things like flu season. There's a lot in the news right now about illnesses. There are periods of time that you can be very short-staffed, and even though you may have a dedicated what we think of as a tech pubs department, I think we've all been in situations where somebody from marketing or God knows where got dragged in and just thrown on a keyboard and was going to help with the emergency of getting the documentation out the door. Basically, a well-designed XML solution, as in FrameMaker, really requires less training. One of the reasons for that is that the element names that actually declare what's going on, title, topic, paragraph, etc., are very repetitious. It really depends upon context as to what they do. And one thing I found, I was involved in several migrations from either Microsoft Word or regular FrameMaker into XML and DITA, and very frequently we would have people move away from 150 to 200 paragraph styles down to maybe a maximum of about 60 or 65 common names that they were using there. So that actually reduced them. Third big driver, I think, is globalization and translation. XML makes it it almost makes you do this. XML makes it much easier to do content reuse. There's something called a conref that would people who know FrameMaker could think of it as a text inset. XML works very well with content management, where it's very, very easy to, there's dozens of vendors that will allow you to assemble documents or manuals from chunks or pieces. So you're going to write or edit once and have it update in 400 instances. And that consistency will, it's one step towards success with translation. And if you take the XML and you actually couple it with something like Acrolinks or another product called Maxit, either one of them, which will help you work with a reduced vocabulary, simplified English, you can potentially reduce your translation costs by as much as 60%. That's a huge savings. The biggest thing is the time saving. The fact that you can actually get a drug approved quicker, the fact that you can get a new aircraft to your customers more quickly. All these things are mission critical. It can take a while to get that return on investment, but it's very dramatic when it comes in. It's sort of like an oil well in that there's a little bit of time priming the pump and getting that gusher to come out, but when it does, all of a sudden it's like it doesn't matter what it took in the past to get to that point. You suddenly have this mammoth amount of return on investment. So that would be my answer.
So what does the curve look like for the ROI? Is it sort of, sometimes you get, it depends on the investment and what you're doing, you'll see sort of a gradual process and it's an angle. Does this one look more like a hockey stick? What is it? And is there a time frame? I know they're all different, but yeah. 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, next generation, what's the...
Yeah. well, certainly, hopefully less than 10 years. My answer to that, Al, is that Adobe and FrameMaker are one of the few vendor solutions that will actually generally give someone a fairly accurate answer. I've been at many conferences where I've seen other systems represented, and somebody will always say, "It depends. Come and see me after the presentation. It depends. It depends. It really depends upon your workflow." It certainly can depend to a certain degree, but a lot of industries like airlines, medical, finance, etc., have anybody in healthcare or insurance, the content's virtually identical in terms of how it's structured. So number one, there's a lot of existing XML structures or applications that can be leveraged. What I would say, I'll just come up with something. Somebody who's doing software documentation, for instance, what Chris described, and I've been involved in some projects like this. I would say that sort of a typical ramp-up time from scratch, starting with nothing, with FrameMaker, kind of a typical ramp-up time of getting to the point that you're getting full results, you're publishing, and you've got every permutation that you want, might be maybe about 6 weeks, and that's if it's fairly complex and you're going into a lot of languages. I think that the measurable return on investment would certainly always happen within 6 months. But even before you get to the point of releasing the product and then figuring out how much less it costs to translate, it often comes in kind of a soft form, just in terms of the writer saying, "Wow, I'm right. It's noon, and I'm where I would normally be at 3 o'clock tomorrow." And those hours normally aren't measured. So that's another thing, is just the comfort factor and the fact, as Chris said earlier, that people focus more on content. So you're going to hear, you'll sometimes see some older presentations where people will actually talk about 18 months, and that's somewhat rare or something highly complex. So many people have already migrated to XML that generally previous clients' work can be leveraged. And I would say at a minimum you'd have pretty dramatic return on investment within 6 months to some degree. That would be my answer.
Nice.
Can I chime in a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure.
Because there are two things I want to say. One is that one of my goals in writing this white paper was to try and kind of lower the bar for entry into XML and DITA, because there's this general perception that you know, this kind of technology it's for big enterprises. It's not. Yeah. You're not going to see a return on investment unless you have a page count in the tens or hundreds of thousands, and I just don't believe that's true. My particular experience. So I'm working in a startup software company. We have, well, I've got on the order of 300 individual DITA topics in my documentation set. It took me about a month really to go from an unstructured FrameMaker template to DITA. It took me another month to implement our delivery system, but that's because it's completely in-house delivery system. The return was almost immediate just in the workflow, because I was no longer building HTML help systems out of some other kind of source. The HTML goes right out on the fly in the browser, and we're seeing, and so that was almost an immediate return, and we're seeing returns continually right now. We're in a situation where we have, it's dynamic. The documentation is truly dynamic. It can respond to the user role. It can get real-time data out of the system that's running in the enterprise and modify the documentation. And so we're just seeing this continual addition of value coming out of this initial decision to make the move.
Cool. Absolutely.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so we're going to stick with you for a second here, Chris, and the whole idea, I'm a manager, tell me what I need to know. So in this case, you know, we talked about I'm a manager, I need a business case to go down this route. But what do I need to know about the whole concept of structure and XML if I'm a manager? I'm not the one writing stuff, I'm just the one that's got to pay for it to get written.
Yeah, that's and actually that is a very, very, very important question. I've been in the same room with managers who have kind of said the word DITA as though it's got some kind of talismanic powers to suddenly make everything better, and that's a red flag going up right there. I think I think the first thing that you need to know is what the technology can do and what it can't do. The technology cannot make your writers write better content. You know, and just because it's structured, just because it's got this kind of rigorous description of what's proper and what's not, that does not mean that by adopting the technology, your documentation will suddenly be well organized. It just doesn't mean that. There are certain things that the technology cannot do, and so you should really understand that, because you might be thinking, I'm trying to think of a good example of something you might say, oh, well, this is going to solve such and such a problem. You know, typically, you know, if you're looking at problems that have to do with just getting the volume of work done, that's not a technological issue. That's a different kind of issue. But there are things that it can do. And you should understand the things that it can do. You know, it can improve your workflow. you can open up or kind of break through silos of information if you use a standard and other departments agree on using that standard. Then suddenly everybody's using, producing the same format of information, and they can use whichever tools they want to do it. So you can break through silos that way. In that regard, you can standardize, which means that maybe if you're using DITA and some other person in your business chain, not just within your company, but within the chain of relationships that you have, if somebody else is using DITA, then you can share information in that way. As Max pointed out, you can really standardize. You can really, I'm overusing that word. You can really kind of make everything look right, because people are focusing on the content, and the formatting is decided on at the rendering time. It's decided on when it's time to actually publish, and so that whole equation is out of the picture of how do I, should I be making this underlined and this and that and the other thing? No, I don't worry about that. I say, is this a certain category of information? If it is, then I wrap it in a certain element, and then let the rendering decide what to do with it. So these sorts of things have to do with improving your workflow and improving your output, and you should understand that the way the technology can do that. It can do that by connecting you to different tools. It can do that by separating content from format. It can do that by moving into a standard so that you can share information with other departments or other enterprises. These are the things that you should understand about XML.
So you don't need to worry so much about the kind of tags that you're using, or some of the more detailed things. It's really more understanding generally how that technology aids your overall operation.
Yeah, well, I guess you're keeping me honest here, but in a sense, I think I could even say yes, because the primary question should be, what do I want to accomplish, and will this technology help me accomplish it?
Yeah.
Then you do have to take the next step, and you have to say, well, okay, am I going to choose a standard? And if I am going to choose a standard, which standard am I going to choose? The two biggies today are DITA and DocBook. Or you might say, well, do I want to invent my own DTD and just do it kind of grassroots? You could go that route as well. Now you're getting more into how are you going to implement what you've decided you want to achieve. And at that point, then you have to know things about skill sets, and you have to know things about, well, you need some specialized knowledge at that point, because you're going to have to work with people who can actually implement your tool chain. Maybe you're the person who can do it. In my case, it worked out that way. Or maybe you'll be looking for somebody like me, or there's a host of people out there who do this for a living. People who come in, set you up, make everything fine, and then go away. Maybe you want to hire somebody who will always be in-house, sort of the way you would have a database administrator in-house to take care of your database. Maybe the whole point of this is to apply kind of database-like attributes to your investment in your documentation. Well, maybe you want to have an administrator on staff to take care of it. These are a lot of there are a lot of decisions. I'm not really giving you a pat answer to it, but you do once you've decided what you want to achieve, then you do have to take the next step and start saying, well, how are we going to make it happen? And that's going to require some specialized knowledge, knowledge that you may not want to have yourself.
Noted. So we've talked a lot from the manager decision-making point of view, but Maxwell, what do I, as a technical writer, I'm receiving this. I've gotten the memo that says removing the structure, removing the XML. How does my role change? How does the setup change? How does the development change? Just broadly, what type of alterations am I in store for?
Certainly. And by the way, I'm going to be speaking a little bit around this topic at an upcoming conference next week here in Portland, Oregon at LavaCon. I'll be doing a presentation called Ditch Your Comfort Zone. So anybody who's in Portland, come and see it. But anyway, I would say, and I think Chris might agree with me here, I think the biggest difference for someone who's using traditional writing methods, whether it's old-fashioned regular FrameMaker or Microsoft Word, most writers have been used to formatting as they write. And even if it was just selecting paragraph tags, you know, this should be a first level head, second level head, third level head. I worked with that for years when I was in the translation industry. And in language translation, we're very, very sensitive to text expansion. You know, if you've got a narrow column, English might be, I hope I'm in the window here, English might be that deep, and German might be that deep. You might actually have that many more lines. In Dutch, there are some words in English that are 7 characters, and in Dutch they can be almost 20. So the reason I'm bringing that up is that, like, why this would matter is that a lot of writers have been used to applying some formatting boredom. It's almost like you have a blank wall and you think you need to put some pictures there or something to break it up. So when I would help people analyze their content to prepare for migrating to XML and FrameMaker, a lot of times I would say, gee, you've got 3 levels of bulleted lists inside of a table cell, you know, and it's kind of like stair steps. It's really narrowing your text down. Is there a reason for doing that? And I actually had people tell me, well, I just thought that it would make the reader, make the reader more interested if it looked like the text was indenting over. There was no purpose to it. So I think what Chris was saying earlier about the process, you need to apply that to whatever you have on either your page or on your screen. And most people are going to have to go to paper for many years as well as the screens. It should really be what I would call kind of purpose-driven publishing. You know, if this is a note or a caution or a warning, does it need to be boxed? You know, what is the best way to convey that information? Many times people put information in tables that could be in lists and vice versa. So part of what happens, like, how does a role change? It's kind of a different mindset in that I think the biggest thing to get used to is having so many things happen automatically. You know, the fact that you're authoring and all of a sudden you're kind of getting this magic formatting, which is really wonderful and really pretty cool. I used to use, the example I used to use, and I've dropped it because younger people who are younger didn't have my parents who'd be their great-grandparents. They don't have the memories back before World War II. But shortly before America entered the war, I think it was in 1940, I think, right around the time of the World's Fair, Oldsmobile introduced the first successful automatic transmission. It was the first time there was a car that you actually did not shift gears. You did the whole thing with the gas pedal. You would think that this would be an overnight sensation. And there were a lot of people who were really uncomfortable driving that car because their foot kept constantly reaching for the clutch. It just wouldn't go away. You know, they had done that all their lives, and they couldn't quite grasp that you don't need to do that anymore. In some sense, authoring with XML is a little bit that way. It's a little bit like using a dishwasher if you used to do everything by hand. If you used to wash your dishes by hand and put them in the rack and then dry them, you know, it's not that you don't do any work at all, but you're able to concentrate on getting the task done and coming back later and having something that is essentially finished that you can then place into the delivery area, which might be the kitchen cabinet. So I think that's part of it. The final thing I would also say is that I think that some tech writers, I think this is changing a little bit with the millennials, but I think with some tech writers who are a little more mature, some of them started out as English lit majors. Some of them had frustrations about being unpublished novelists. And I think that subconsciously channeled into how they wrote and what they were trying to create. So a lot of writers, I hear Chris laughing, I'm sure he's run into this. So there are some writers who sort of they actually kind of wanted to put their fingerprints on the page. They wanted it to look different. They wanted to know that Maxwell did that chapter, and that's really bad for business. It's just bad. You know, if you're in a hotel and you want to provide a consistent experience, you really don't want a bed just turned at a 45-degree angle because the maid felt like doing that. You know, you have to have some standards. So in general, most of it's easier to do your job, and it's kind of letting go of these old things that you did manually. I think that's the biggest shift.
Okay. And in that sense, managers can, before Connie jumps into our next question, managers can certainly help out this process by bringing in training, by bringing in support, by bringing in examples, and help manage this process from going from one to the other. It not only helps people ramp up faster and become more efficient and effective with the new tool, it keeps them from trying to kill the tool before it's allowed to blossom. Right, so
absolutely, yeah. And by the way, Al, if I could just add 15 seconds to that, I would say this: even if you have already selected another tool, let's say that you're not going to use Adobe FrameMaker, you know, it's actually written in stone, and you've got a contract with some other product, I would say still go ahead and download Adobe FrameMaker, and the reason is that you can publish data in XML out of the box with no modification at all, and you can actually get pleasing results. And one of the new features is that without any setup, you can actually instantly publish to 5 different online formats. So maybe you're going to do that a different way with whatever solution you chose, but it's almost like driver's training school. It's a real easy way for somebody to get behind the wheel of the car, find what it feels like to go around a corner, that they're not going to roll down the hill and get killed. That's one thing that I love about FrameMaker, is it allows you to move into that experience without being a shocking jump into the cold water thing.
Makes sense. Connie, do you want to go ahead and hit our next question? We got about 10 minutes or so for our questions.
All right. Well, one of the things that we mentioned it briefly in some of the earlier questions, sort of as tangentially, about tools such as FrameMaker, but there's often a tool chain, I think is how, Chris, you referred to it. Yeah. So one of the things that I think a lot of folks who don't have familiarity, particularly those managers or maybe writers who aren't in a technology area, would want to know is, what is the tool chain? What else do I need? You tell me I need FrameMaker. You know, what does that represent in the whole grand scheme of this is what you got to do to publish structured content in XML?
Well, I mean, to author XML, really all you need is Notepad or something like that, and then you just kind of print it out and let people try and read it. But that's not really what you're asking at all. And actually, it's a good question, and it's been a known issue since way back in SGML days. I don't know if you remember, if anybody remembers SGML at all, and Charles Goldfarb, who wrote the SGML Bible, I guess, and he actually came up with the term an SGML application. And an SGML application was the collection of processes that go together to get you from authoring your structured content to actually publishing it out. And so FrameMaker, for example, back in the day before XML, used to call the kind of collection of everything that put together an SGML application. Now with the advent of XML, it's called a structured application. But the point is, there are always there are common elements in any tool chain. You need an authoring software. It could be Notepad. There are people who do use text editors to edit XML. But you do need something that can author it. It's helpful if it gives you some kind of managing capabilities, you know, listing the elements that you can put in, maybe smart kind of context-based recommendations of which elements can go in at a certain location, that sort of thing. authoring software is getting increasingly more sophisticated. You can get there's FrameMaker. There are other people who make kind of desktop-oriented authoring products. There are people now working on web-oriented authoring products where you're editing in a web page and saving to a server and that sort of thing. But that's one component is the authoring. Another component is just kind of the storage and the management of the XML files.
Yeah.
And so there are people who talk about using component content management systems and the like. Again, this area can get very baroque, very, very complex, or it can be pretty simple. Right now, I'm only using Subversion, which is source control, and I'm only using that. And I've got other projects going where I simply use the file system. But you do need to have some way of managing the files. The chances are, if you're working in DITA, that you're going to have a large collection of individual files, and you're going to be kind of putting them together, gluing them together in different ways. So you need that sort of thing. You need some kind of rendering capability, and so, for example, you want to publish out to PDF, you need something that can publish it out to PDF. You want to publish it out to HTML, you need something that can do that. And again, there are different approaches to doing that. DITA is well known for what they call the Open Toolkit. The Open Toolkit is a collection of transforms that take the DITA and they turn it into HTML, or it can, with other plugins, it can turn it into PDF. It can turn it into EPUB, that sort of thing. You can go another route, and so, for example, FrameMaker, as Max pointed out, you can take FrameMaker and you can have all your files in DITA, you can open them up in FrameMaker, you can save as PDF, you can save as HTML, or publish out to the different formats that way. I think there are other... I don't know. Okay, I'll stop there, I guess, in that regard. But there are also, but now there are also dynamic publishing systems that you can get. I've got my homegrown dynamic system, but there are products out there that actually store publications on a server, and then they can respond to circumstances on the user's side to push out the data in different ways. So you need all that, and then, but aside from that, you also typically you're going to need the DTD or the schema that describes the standard of XML that you're using. You're going to need probably some form of transforms that will turn it into something else, and then again, some kind of content management system, whether it's your file system or something more elaborate.
Okay.
Gotcha. All right, so we are nearing the end, but we're remiss. We've mentioned FrameMaker a little bit, and for our inexperienced folks who are kind of inexperienced with this but want to kick the tires, Maxwell, how can FrameMaker assist an inexperienced team in this transition to XML and DITA? And let's go with the elevator pitch aspect, and then we're going to have your contact information. Anybody else who wants to dive deep can certainly do that.
Certainly.
Future.
And I'm going to keep my eye on the watch as I do this. I'm looking at the red second hand right underneath the. Looks like I'm taking a selfie here. Anyway, what I would say is this. Actually, Al, in two different ways. One is that FrameMaker out of the box, as I said, will let you publish directly to DITA using DITA 1.2, a DITA 1.2 application that's set up that will format quite nicely. And I would say if somebody has minimal needs, about the most they would need to do is to apply their corporate logo somewhere in the header of the page. There would really be almost nothing to do. That would be one way. Another way is Chris made a reference earlier about, sort of a third alternative is instead of using HTML, DocBook, or DITA, it is possible to customize XML or DITA. In other words, you can actually have custom tags. And I actually had a personal experience with that where FrameMaker came to tremendous assistance. I was involved to do the contract training for a state agency on the East Coast. So these were state government workers, people who work for the government, who had never used anything except Microsoft Word, and they had never seen FrameMaker, ever. They hadn't even seen a demo. And I worked with somebody who was quite brilliant, who created a really clever customized DITA application. So instead of using elements like title, P for paragraph, OL for ordered list, UL for unnumbered list. Instead of that, each instance, as it progressed down through the training materials that they had to author, were almost like dynamo labelers, saying, it was basically labeling what it was that like preparation for class, introduction. Then the next thing would be class materials, and so each item on the list would say material, material, material. And then the DTD and these files that we talk about that are in the background driving all of this, after you had class materials, the only legal choice you had was agenda. You had to do a class agenda. So anyway, I went back and I had a total of 5 days to train these people who had never seen FrameMaker. So they were learning FrameMaker and DITA XML, customized DITA at the same time. Long story short, had 5 days, and I was getting kind of worried because I wasn't getting a lot of questions by Thursday. So I thought maybe I'd lost them. Maybe this wasn't going anywhere. This client bought 100 hours of help desk support from me, so that the agency I work for, they would have up to 100 hours prepaid. They only used 8.5 hours of paid help desk support. Like with that 5 days of training, because that particular FrameMaker application was so fine-tuned to the one thing that they did, that was how it helped those users. A room full of Microsoft Word users came in who had never seen a FrameMaker demo, and by Friday they knew how to do their jobs. And these were the people who trained the other government workers. Ironically, a year later, this group actually won a Project Training Excellence Award from the ASTD Society. They happened to be in Portland, Oregon. I was very lucky to go to the banquet when they got the Crystal Award. So that was, I think, kind of an extreme example, but it shows that if you do what Chris said, if you really analyze your needs, first of all, do I need DITA? What do I need to accomplish? What is the purpose of this? You can make your elements and tools that you're using on the screen be so purpose-driven, it can be almost like a child's watercolor palette, where the choices are real obvious, and maybe there's only 16 things to choose from, in terms of major structure. And that's one way that it can really help. Basically, just narrow the choices down to only what you have to do, period.
Very nice. So definitely more questions that we could ask. I'm noticing the time, and we are nearing the end. We need to grab our towels and start looking for an interdimensional portal somewhere. So, Chris and Maxwell, thank you so much for spending some time with us and helping us.
It was a pleasure. It was a very big pleasure.
No, we really appreciate your time on this.
Great.
It was a pleasure.
Yep, and I enjoyed working with Chris again because we were in the same building in San Jose back when. Good God, I don't know who was president back a long time ago. And it's interesting, I'd always enjoy hearing Chris's voice, and Chris was playing the guitar back then too, making me jealous, and Chris still has a full head of hair. And I look like a sea monkey, So I always learn from Chris, and I really enjoy working with him, including the white paper.
Well, thank you, Beth, very much.
Thank you.
Speaking of the white paper, it is linked on the TechWhirl site for that you're watching this on. It's not obviously on the YouTube one, but it's there. Keep that link. It's definitely worth a read, and if you're gearing up for this trip, then you certainly do that. Some other places that before I jump into the conferences, Adobe's got a TechCom survey out. It's an annual event. If you're on Twitter, you can certainly find it. We've been promoting it. We'll add a link to it on the on the actual web page. Is there an easy, not bit.ly 65? Is it on the Adobe TechCom blog? I assume. I haven't checked it, but I assume the link to it is there.
Yes, yeah, it is there, Al. And also, if you follow us on Twitter, either Maxwell Hoffman, 2 Fs and 2 Ns, or if you follow Adobe TCS, if you follow either one of those tweets, you'll get lots and lots of tweets about this survey.
So both places, take it. I think the warning's about 10 minutes worth of your time.
Yeah.
Go ahead and jump in and do it, because I know the guys and the girls who are working on this do absolutely take the information and utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have more questions, and we're certain that you do, we do. We just get it. We got conference season is upon us, and both of these gentlemen are going to be various places. Chris is going to be in Munich in November, presenting his online doc system at DITA Europe 2014. So look if you're going. I can. And this, hey Chris, this is the one that does the DITA HTML. Correct.
Yeah, it's on the fly in the browser. It takes DITA topics and turns them into HTML per request.
Oh.
Nice. So DITA Europe, look it up and be able to come see Chris at that. The Adobe gang are traveling, and we're kind of flying parallel on this one. Going to be in LavaCon next week. Adobe Day is October 12th. That's the Sunday. LavaCon kicks off on the 13th, Monday. Adobe Day to attend. A lot of thought leaders coming. Certainly encourage you to do that. You're going to see Maxwell there and all of the folks to answer your questions, and you can dive more into XML. Also going to be at information. We will be there as well, so you can ask us. I don't know. We know some of the really good bars in town. But you can ask questions as well if you want to. But we're going to be there. Information Development World is going to be San Jose. It is October 22nd through the 24th. We're all going to be there. And then you guys are heading over to TCOM in Germany. That's November 11th to 13th. So quite a lot of mileage starting it for you, at least after LavaCon. But I know some of the other folks joining you, it's going to take a while to air miles to
absolutely. Yeah, and TCOM is in Stuttgart this year. It has been in Wiesbaden for decades, and I think they're rebuilding the conference. So I think this year, next year, it's in Stuttgart, and then I believe it goes back to Wiesbaden in 2016.
Very nice. So, we haven't got to go to that one yet. We were hoping maybe next year is our year to.
Yeah, I hope so.
So, final thought as we wind down. If you haven't had if you're really in the market looking at these, we've talked about FrameMaker. There's RoboHelp in the communications suite. Have a check. Just check out the tool and click on the link if you're on TechWhirl. It's the big square in the upper right that says Adobe. They'll help you out. Chris, Maxwell, thank you so much once again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joe Hoffmann for taking our notes. Hopefully we didn't go to too many tangents. And finally, Connie, myself, and everyone at TechWhirl, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.